The clinking of silverware and murmurs of conversation echoed gently through the dining room of the Whittaker family estate. Candlelight flickered across crystal glasses, casting a warm golden hue on the gathered faces of parents, siblings, cousins, and in-laws. It was supposed to be a celebratory evening, a reunion of sorts. Eleanor Whittaker, matriarch and perennial host, had gone all out. Linen napkins, her prized roast lamb, even her treasured heirloom china had made an appearance. For Clara Bennett, seated at the far end of the table beside her husband of 7 years, it was just another night to wear the mask she'd grown accustomed to, one of the devoted, loving wife. She knew tonight wouldn't end with dessert. As if on cue, the sharp ting of metal on glass silenced the room. Everyone turned toward Ethan, her husband, standing at his seat with a nervous smile and flushed cheeks. He tapped his wine glass once more, his hand trembling slightly. Clara's gaze was steady, her pulse slow and measured, as if watching the final scene of a play she'd already read. "I have an announcement to make," Ethan said, voice catching on the first syllable. Clara noticed the way his eyes flicked to her younger sister, Tessa, seated 2 chairs down. Tessa stared intently at her plate, but not before a glance, swift and electric, passed between them. The silence at the table stretched. "Clara and I," he continued, then paused, as if bracing himself. "We've decided to part ways." Gasps echoed. Aunt Miriam dropped her fork with a sharp clatter. Clara's mother went rigid. Her father's expression darkened beneath his heavy brows. "I hadn't planned to share this tonight," Ethan said, his voice gaining strength, "but since we're all together, it felt right. Clara and I have agreed to separate. And there's something else." He reached across the table and took Tessa's hand in his. The room collectively stopped breathing. "Tessa and I. We're in love. It's been a journey, confusing, difficult. But love doesn't always follow the rules. Sometimes it finds you in unexpected places." The silence that followed was suffocating. All eyes turned to Clara, expecting, what? A breakdown? An outburst? Tears? But Clara only tilted her head slightly and said, with eerie calm, "Would everyone please check your email?" Confusion flickered across faces. Ethan blinked. "What?" "I sent an email," Clara said, pulling her phone from her clutch. "To all of you. Just before dinner. Should have arrived by now." Around the table, chairs scraped as family members reached for their phones. One by one, screens lit up. Tessa's fingers shook as she unlocked hers. Ethan stayed frozen, uncertainty creeping into his polished features. Clara watched the reactions unfold like dominoes. Her cousin Alex blinked, then swore under his breath. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. Her brother scrolled slowly, lips tightening. Even Aunt Miriam made a strangled noise somewhere between disbelief and outrage. "What is this?" Tessa whispered, face draining of color. Ethan fumbled for his phone. "Documentation," Clara said softly, folding her hands in her lap. "Ideal and facts. Patterns. Truth. You see, I'm not just your quiet sister, your well-mannered daughter-in-law, or Ethan's demure wife. I work in cybersecurity. My specialty? Digital forensics." Aunt Miriam looked up. "What? What are we looking at?" "Just the highlights," Clara replied. "Emails. Call logs. Location data. Screenshots of texts. Credit card records. Hotel receipts. 6 months of collected data, organized and time-stamped." Ethan finally found the email and opened it. Clara watched the blood drain from his face as he scrolled through the first few images. "You've been spying on me?" he snapped. "I've been observing," she replied coolly. "Like any good analyst. When I noticed inconsistencies, I followed the digital trail. I wasn't expecting to find this." She gestured lightly to him and Tessa. "But here we are." Tessa slammed her phone down. "You invaded our privacy. You invaded my home," Clara said, her voice rising slightly for the first time. "You slept with my husband while I was at work. You used my kitchen to bake your little late-night apple crisps. You borrowed my dresses, my books, my family's trust, and used them as props in your affair." "I didn't mean for this to happen," Tessa said, her voice cracking. "Didn't mean for it to happen?" Clara repeated. "You were under my roof for 8 months. You called Ethan brother-in-law with a smile while you were sneaking into his hotel room 3 nights a week." Ethan stood, his voice defensive. "You don't understand, Clara and I hadn't been connecting for a long time. You were distant, absorbed in your work." Clara stood too. "Don't blame this on me. Don't reduce your betrayal to a marital slump. You could have spoken to me. You could have ended it cleanly. But instead, you and my sister, spent years constructing a lie. She turned to the rest of the table, voice steady but powerful. You all deserve to know the truth. I wasn't going to sit here and let them feed you some romanticized version of falling in love. What they've done is not love, it's convenience, cowardice, and calculated deceit. Her father spoke at last, voice hard as steel. Ethan, get out of my house. And take your +1 with you. Tessa paled. Dad. Not tonight, Tessa, her mother said. Not tonight. Clara felt the weight of months lift off her shoulders. No more pretending. No more waiting. Her truth had been laid bare, undeniable, irreparable. She gathered her coat and walked calmly to the front door. I'm sorry, Mom, she said gently. I didn't want to ruin the evening. Her mother's eyes shimmered with tears. You didn't, sweetheart. You gave us the truth. As Clara stepped into the cold night, a new warmth settled inside her, not of vengeance, but of clarity. She had been the one betrayed. But she would also be the one to rise. The affair didn't explode into Clara's life, it crept in, quietly and undetected, like a slow leak beneath the floorboards. It was the kind of betrayal you didn't feel until it had already rotted the foundation beneath you. Clara and Ethan's relationship had once been everything she imagined love should be. They met at a tech conference in San Francisco. He was a guest speaker on pediatric innovations in medicine, she was part of a cybersecurity panel. They'd bonded over a mutual disdain for the city's overpriced lattes and an admiration for the classics, Jane Austen for her, old medical journals for him. A whirlwind romance followed, culminating in a modest wedding in her parents' garden, under a canopy of fairy lights and blooming dogwood. The first few years were golden. They bought a charming craftsman home in Tacoma, and weekends were filled with DIY projects and Sunday pancake rituals. Ethan worked long hours at the children's hospital, but he always found time to leave sticky notes in her lunchbox or surprise her with candles and wine on random Tuesdays. Clara's job as a digital forensics specialist for a security firm was demanding but flexible, and she often worked from home. Then came Tessa. Her younger sister had always been the family's wild card, free-spirited, creative, inconsistent. College hadn't stuck. Neither had the pastry business or the yoga certification. When she showed up on Clara's doorstep after a failed stint managing an art studio in Austin, Clara didn't hesitate. She opened the guest room and told Ethan, she just needs a few months to get her feet under her. Ethan hesitated. Clara. Are you sure? We finally have the house to ourselves. She's my sister, Clara replied simply. And family shows up. What was meant to be 8 weeks became 6 months. At first, it was even fun. Tessa's energy livened up the house. She cooked elaborate vegan meals, filled the living room with music, convinced Clara to go jogging before dawn, and roped Ethan into helping her repaint the garage into an art studio. Clara welcomed the newfound connection, especially after years of drifting from her once close sibling. She noticed how Tessa and Ethan laughed together, shared sarcastic glances over dinner. She told herself it was natural, they were both funny, social, warm. Ethan wasn't doing anything wrong. And even if she sometimes felt like an outsider watching from a distance, she blamed herself. She had deadlines. Night meetings. Clients in Singapore and Sydney who needed her attention at 2 a.m. She wasn't as available as she used to be, but that was part of being ambitious, wasn't it? Still, odd moments began to prick at her. Ethan working later. Tessa disappearing for hours under the guise of gallery errands. Her sister's phone always flipped screen down when Clara entered the room. Inside jokes she didn't understand. Ethan changing his phone password after years of open access. She brushed the thoughts away. Paranoia wasn't like her. She dealt in facts, in verifiable truths. Not feelings. Then came the moment everything unraveled. It was a rainy Tuesday evening. Clara had a rough day, and Ethan was still at the hospital. She was starving and decided to order sushi from their favorite spot. Her phone was charging upstairs, so she grabbed Ethan's laptop to place the order. When she opened the browser, the previous session restored automatically. His email inbox blinked open. She hadn't intended to pry. But the subject line caught her eye. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. The sender? Tessa. The timestamp? Less than 24 hours ago. Clara stared at the screen, unsure if her brain was processing correctly. She clicked it, and the full message appeared. I keep replaying everything. The way you looked at me. The way you touched me. I know it's risky, but I don't care anymore. Ethan's reply had come just 10 minutes later. I hate lying to her. But every time I see you, I know I'd do it all over again. We'll figure it out. We just have to be careful. Clara closed the laptop. She sat in the silence of her living room, the hum of the fridge the only sound. She didn't cry. Didn't scream. She simply existed, frozen in place, staring at the now closed laptop. When Ethan came home an hour later, soaked from the rain and smiling tiredly, she studied his face. Every detail, the damp hair falling over his forehead, the casual kiss on her cheek, the way he toed off his shoes. "You okay?" he asked. "Just tired," she replied. She went upstairs and locked herself in the bathroom, running the shower to mask the sobs that wouldn't come. Over the following days, she became a ghost in her own life. She went through the motions: work, chores, dinners. She slept next to him, kissed him good morning, listened to Tessa chatter about gallery events. And all the while, she collected phone records, text logs, GPS histories, security camera screenshots from their Ring doorbell showing Tessa slipping in late at night when Clara was supposedly out of town. She retrieved receipts from Ethan's car, traced hotel stays, restaurant bills. She found dozens of emails stretching back over 2 years. Some romantic, others mundane. Planning, hiding, dreaming. They had codes. Fake contact names. Even an alternate email account that forwarded to both of them. She documented everything. Not because she didn't believe it, but because she knew no one else would, not without proof. Ethan was beloved by her family. Tessa was the flaky little sister, sure, but no one saw her as malicious. Clara would be cast as the cold, unavailable wife, the workaholic who didn't see her husband slipping away. She couldn't allow that narrative to stand. And so, she smiled through dinners. Played the part of the oblivious wife. She went on a weekend trip with Tessa and their mother. Let Ethan think he was still fooling her. All the while, her digital archive grew, its folders labeled, organized, cross-referenced. One night, watching Ethan sleep peacefully beside her, she whispered to the ceiling, "You think I'm the fool." She wasn't. And soon, neither would anyone else be. For 3 months, Clara lived as 2 different women. By day, she was a composed, rational wife, going through the motions of married life with mechanical precision. She kissed Ethan goodbye each morning, packed his lunches, texted him updates about errands and groceries, and even left him thoughtful notes on his windshield like she used to. She joked with Tessa when they bumped into each other at the farmer's market or family brunches, smiling through gritted teeth as her sister wrapped her arms around her in faux sincere affection. But by night, Clara became something else entirely, a silent hunter. Her second life unfolded behind a screen, a web of folders, trackers, backups, and spreadsheets that documented the entire illicit affair between Ethan and Tessa. Every night, after Ethan drifted into sleep, Clara would slide out of bed, open her laptop, and update the timeline: new receipts, new call logs, another intercepted message forwarded from a cloud sync Ethan didn't realize he had never turned off. Their affair wasn't just active, it was careless. She discovered they used a joint Google Calendar under the pseudonyms Lena and Tom. She found coded entries like Art Walk, 6 p.m., L, and inventory check at studio that conveniently aligned with hotel bookings or flight confirmations. She even tracked down a separate credit card account, one Ethan had opened using an alternate mailing address, used almost exclusively for their romantic outings, couples massages, expensive wine bars, boutique hotels just far enough from town to avoid suspicion. One day, Clara cross-referenced the card statements and noticed a charge at a jeweler. Curious, she drove there under the pretense of looking for a necklace for her mother's birthday. The manager, helpful and unsuspecting, brought out a sales record after she described the transaction. A custom ring. Not an engagement ring, but a slim band etched with the words, "She doesn't see us." Clara felt a rush of heat behind her eyes. But she thanked the manager politely and left. They weren't just betraying her, they were mocking her. In one particularly damning find, she unearthed a thread where Tessa wrote, "Clara's so busy saving everyone else's digital lives, she doesn't even notice her own is disintegrating." Ethan had replied, "It's almost poetic. She investigates cheaters for a living and sleeps next to one every night." The words cut deep, not because they surprised her, but because they confirmed what she already knew. They weren't sorry. They were smug. Triumphant. Convinced they were winning. What they didn't realize was that Clara had stopped playing the game. She was writing a different ending. Her first attempt at confronting the situation had been careful, controlled. One evening, after Ethan returned from a supposed emergency consult that Clara knew had been a weekend at a cabin with Tessa, she poured them each a glass of wine and joined him on the back porch swing. "I've been thinking about Tessa," she said softly, watching his profile. He turned slightly tense. "What about her? You two seem close." He chuckled. "Too easily. She's your sister, Clara. Of course I'm friendly with her." "Really close," she said, locking eyes with him. "Anything you want to tell me?" There was a pause. For 1 second, Clara thought he might crack. There was a flicker, shame, guilt, fear, she couldn't quite place. But then it vanished. "I don't know what you're implying," he said, setting his glass down. "But if you're feeling insecure, maybe we should talk about what's really going on here." He flipped it on her. Just like that. Clean, sharp, practiced. It was confirmation. Not of innocence, but of strategy. They had a story prepared. One that cast Clara as the paranoid wife, the workaholic, the one whose neglect had pushed Ethan into someone else's arms. Clara was the antagonist in their version of events, and if she confronted them head-on, they'd spin it into a redemption arc for themselves. So she changed tactics. She started leaving trails, breadcrumbs she knew Ethan would find. Hotel booking confirmations accidentally left open on the family computer. A printed credit card statement left in the recycling bin with charges circled in red ink. A browser window open to a family law attorney's website. Each time, Ethan either ignored it or casually explained it away. "Oh, that hotel? It was for a conference. I just booked it under my name because the admin was out. I don't know why the GPS says I was in Bellevue. I must have left my phone in someone's car." Meanwhile, Tess increased her efforts to disarm Clara. She invited her to brunches. Talked about getting back into dating. Once, she tried setting Clara up with a recently divorced art curator. "You deserve someone who really sees you," Tessa said sweetly, twisting the knife. "Ethan and I both worry you work too hard." It was galling. But the breaking point wasn't a receipt or a text. It was their use of Clara's own mother. One weekend, while Clara helped her parents move some furniture, her mother casually mentioned, "Tessa's been helping Ethan plan something for your anniversary. She says it's a surprise, but I think it might be a trip." "Isn't that sweet?" Clara nearly dropped the box she was holding. "Anniversary?" she echoed. Her mother nodded. "They've been working on it for weeks." It wasn't the lie that stung, it was the way they'd roped in someone who loved her to make their deceit more convincing. They turned her own family into unwitting accomplices. That night, Clara stared at her computer screen, hands motionless on the keyboard. They weren't just cheating on her. They were building a reality designed to collapse her completely when the time came. She was no longer just documenting an affair. She was building a case for psychological manipulation, financial dishonesty, and emotional abuse. She reached out to a private investigator, Douglas Parker, known for handling high-stakes infidelity cases. She didn't need him to uncover the affair. She had already done that better than most professionals. "I'm not here to hire you," Clara said when she sat across from him, laying out the folders and USB drives. "I'm here to verify what I have. To know if it's enough." Parker flipped through the evidence in silence for several minutes. Finally, he looked up, impressed. "Most clients come to me with suspicions. You came with a conviction. And a case file better than some police reports I've seen." "What's next?" she asked. "You need proof of intent. It's not just about what they did, it's what they planned. If you can prove deception was deliberate and long-term, it strengthens your case." Clara nodded. She would find that too. She would unmask their narrative. And when the moment came, when Ethan and Tessa thought they were finally free to unveil their truth to the world, Clara would be ready. With the real truth. The complete one. And she wouldn't need to raise her voice to expose it. By the time Clara walked out of Douglas Parker's office, she no longer felt like a betrayed wife. She felt like an architect, blueprints in hand, every bolt and beam of their lies mapped out. The framework of their deception had been elaborate, yes, but flawed. Because neither Ethan nor Tessa had counted on her fighting back with the very skills she used every day in her professional life: methodical precision, strategic timing, and evidence they couldn't twist. Douglas had given her clear next steps. "You've got emotional betrayal and circumstantial evidence in spades," he'd said, "but you need to nail intent. That's what tips a sympathetic court, And a public audience, into your corner. And so, Clara dove deeper. She traced financial transfers from their joint savings to a shadow account Ethan had created under a shell name, E. Langston. It wasn't subtle, just hidden well enough that Ethan thought she'd never look. But Clara knew where to dig. Months earlier, Ethan had transferred nearly $18,000, enough for a down payment on the freedom he believed he deserved. She uncovered text messages on his cloud backup that Ethan hadn't deleted because he assumed they weren't syncing. In those, she saw the truth laid bare, conversations between him and Tessa discussing when and how to announce their relationship. They joked about how Clara would probably be too stunned to speak, and how Tessa would play the role of the misunderstood little sister who fell in love. One message chilled Clara more than any other. Tessa, she's so devoted to the truth. Let's see how she handles ours. Ethan, she's so logical she'll talk herself out of anger. She'll make it easy for us. Clara stared at that for a long time. Not because she doubted it, but because it confirmed what she'd feared the most. They saw her kindness as a weakness. Her intelligence as apathy. Her composure as permission. But they didn't understand, truth wasn't just her job. It was her identity. And she was done letting them define the narrative. Her divorce attorney, Diana Wright, reviewed Clara's compilation of evidence with the practiced neutrality of someone who had seen everything: cheating spouses, hidden accounts, secret families, but still raised an eyebrow. "This is surgical," Diana said. "You didn't just catch them cheating. You documented their strategy to manipulate everyone else around them." Clara nodded. "That's what I want people to see. Not just what they did, but what they planned." "You're not just looking for a settlement," Diana observed. "You're looking for vindication." Clara met her gaze. "I'm looking for the truth to land in the room before their version does." Diana steepled her fingers. "Then we do this carefully. A single misstep and they'll paint you as unstable. Emotional. You need to remain measured, calm. Let the facts speak." "Exactly," Clara said. "That's why I'm not confronting them privately. I'm doing it publicly. With a delivery system they can't interrupt or twist." That opportunity arrived faster than expected. A text came from her mother on a Wednesday afternoon. "Mom, family dinner this Sunday for Dad's birthday. Everyone's coming, including Ethan and Tessa. Please come too, sweetheart. Don't make it awkward." Clara read it 3 times. This was it. The perfect stage. All the key players gathered. A family milestone, the type of event Ethan and Tessa would use to reframe their betrayal as a new beginning after Clara had so graciously let go. She could practically hear their lines rehearsed in bathroom mirrors. "We didn't plan it. It just happened. Clara and I were already drifting apart. Tessa and I didn't want to hurt anyone, but you can't choose who you love." No. Clara would not let them control the story. She spent the next 3 days preparing her offensive like a war general. She created custom email packages for each family member. Not mass-forwarded files, but tailored messages with only the evidence relevant to them. Her father's email included proof that Ethan had borrowed money from him under false pretenses, claiming it was for medical school debt, when in fact it had been used to fund getaways with Tessa. Her mother's file contained text messages from Tessa using her as an alibi: "Dinner with Mom tonight, so no worries," on nights she'd spent in hotel rooms with Ethan. Her cousins, uncles, aunts, all received versions of the truth: screenshots, photos, receipts, date stamps, conversations. Clara ensured every message was time-stamped, clearly labeled, and legally sourced. Every single one began with the same phrase. "In light of the announcement Ethan and Tessa plan to make this Sunday, I thought you deserved the full context." The master file was sent to herself, with all attachments, a full chronological timeline, and notes detailing how and when she uncovered each piece. She added it to a secure email scheduler with a delivery time set for 8:14 p.m. right in the middle of dessert. Sunday arrived with deceptive peace. Clara dressed simply but confidently in a soft cream blouse and navy trousers. She wore her grandmother's vintage wristwatch and her engagement ring, still on her finger, for now. She brought a bottle of wine and a pecan pie. She smiled through hugs and small talk, careful to avoid sitting too close to Ethan or Tessa. They were there, of course. Sitting side by side on the couch, just close enough to look suspiciously unified but not openly romantic. Yet. Dinner proceeded with excruciating normalcy. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, birthday wishes, clinking glasses. Clara made polite conversation, answered questions about work, even laughed once or twice. She saw Ethan glance at Tessa midway through dessert, a silent cue passing between them. He stood, tapped his glass with a spoon. The room quieted. Clara's watch ticked steadily, 8:13. "I have something to share," Ethan began, voice solemn. "It's not easy, but it's necessary." Clara's hand hovered near her phone under the table, her finger over the send button. "Clara and I are separating," he continued. "We've grown apart. We've both changed. And in that space, something unexpected happened." He reached for Tessa's hand. "She and I. We've found something real. Something honest." Clara pressed send. Phones around the table began to buzz. A symphony of alerts. Tessa blinked. Clara looked up and spoke clearly, evenly. "Everyone, please check your emails." The moments that followed were slow motion. Gasps. Frozen faces. Whispered curses. Clara's mother clutched her phone, eyes wide with horror. Her father's expression darkened with rage. Tessa's hand dropped from Ethan's. Ethan fumbled with his phone, unlocking it with trembling fingers. Clara stayed seated. Calm. Watching. "I thought you deserved the truth," she said quietly. "The real one. Not the one they rehearsed." Silence fell, broken only by the rustling of papers and fingers swiping screens. Then, her cousin Jonah, voice low and incredulous, said, 2 years? Her aunt whispered, "She planned the anniversary with your mom?" Tessa stood. "You had no right to." "I had every right," Clara replied. "You wrote about me. Lied to me. Laughed at me. And you thought I'd just sit there and take it." Ethan tried to regain control. "This is Clara's way of—" "Enough," her father barked. "I don't want to hear another word." Clara stood. "I'm sorry, Dad," she said. "I didn't want your birthday to be about this. But they left me no choice." And then she left the table, her heels quiet against the hardwood floor, while Ethan and Tessa sat in stunned silence, their carefully built world burning down around them. The truth had arrived. And there would be no recovering from it. Clara didn't look back as she walked out of her parents' home that night. The cold evening air hit her like a baptism, sharp, cleansing, real. Behind her, raised voices clashed with stunned silence. Years of manipulation, deceit, and quiet humiliation had unraveled in minutes. And not with rage or chaos, but with clarity and facts, her tools, her power. By morning, her inbox was flooded. Messages from family members poured in, some apologetic, some outraged on her behalf, all grateful for the truth. Her mother's was the hardest to read. "I'm so sorry I didn't see it. I'm proud of you, Clara. You handled it with strength I can only hope to match." Ethan tried calling, twice. Then came the texts. "We need to talk. You blindsided us. That was cruel." She blocked him without a word. The next day, she filed for divorce. Legally, it was straightforward. Emotionally, it was complex. But she stayed focused. She wasn't seeking revenge. She wasn't interested in apologies or reconciliations. She only wanted one thing: ownership of her own story. Tessa moved out of the city within a month. The whispers at the gallery, the family's cold stares, the shame she hadn't prepared for, it was too much. Ethan tried to maintain his professional facade, but word had spread. A man who cheats on his wife with her sister doesn't command much respect in the hospital halls. Clara, on the other hand, flourished. She moved into a loft downtown, minimalist, sun-filled, entirely her own. She redecorated with color and softness, reclaimed parts of herself she'd neglected. Her firm offered her a promotion. She accepted it. Life didn't go back to normal, it became something new. One evening, standing at her window overlooking the Sound, Clara thought back to the night of the family dinner. The chaos. The hush. The unraveling. They had planned to rewrite her reality. Instead, she had rewritten theirs. Not with anger. Not with bitterness. With truth. And that was her final act of power. The story of Clara Bennett wouldn't be one of betrayal. It would be one of reclamation. Of rebuilding. And this time, no one but her would hold the pen.